find her is with my evil eye. Aha! There she is.
De facto, in fact or in effect, whether by right or not.
الدبابة وين؟
جنبية.
الدبابة جنبكم؟ ما عم تتحرك ولا واقف؟ نزل حدا منها؟
هي بتتحرك.
تتحرك؟
ميتين.
ميتين؟ وهم هلا بعد بالسيارة؟ انت هلا وين متخبية هلا؟ وين انت هلا محمية؟
بالسيارة.
جوا السيارة انت صح؟ مش برا السيارة؟
صح.
طيب خليكي يا عمري بالسيارة، أنا حتمني فاتحة الخط معاكي، أتمني أحكي معك، ما بدي أسكر التليفون، تمام؟ إيش يا عمري؟ يا حبيبتي يا عمري والله معك، هيني أنا مش تاركك بحكي معاكي، ما بدي أصلا أتركك. حبيبتي والله لو بإيدي لأذيكي. نحكي يا الله. يا رب تحمينا.
يا رب تحمينا.
When 5-year-old Hind Rajab was killed in Gaza City on January 29, 2024, along with 6 family members and 2 paramedics, Israel denied its troops had been at the scene. A previous bird's-eye view investigation by Al Jazeera had already found evidence that Israeli tanks and troops were at the scene. And now, an Al Jazeera documentary, Tip of the Iceberg, made with the Hind Rajab Foundation, has uncovered the identities of those suspected of being involved in their killings. It also uncovered the chain of command. At the top is Colonel Beni Aharon of the 401st Armored Brigade. The documentary found that the tanks present in the area that day were under his leadership. An investigation by the research group Forensic Architecture identified the vehicles at the scene of Hind's killing as Israeli Merkava tanks. Next in command is Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Ella of the brigade's 52nd Armored Battalion. A unit within that battalion is suspected of killing the family and the paramedics who tried to help them, and then tampering with the scene. They're known as the Vampire Empire Company, led by Major Sean Glass. Information obtained by Al Jazeera found that Glass ordered the shelling of the family's car and the attack on the ambulance sent to rescue Hind. Al Jazeera's Arabic documentary also found that the company was among the first units to enter Gaza in October 2023. Since then, it has led some of the deadliest operations in Israel's war on Gaza. Those include attacks on various hospitals, including Al-Shifa, once the largest medical complex in the Strip. The Hind Rajab Foundation has filed criminal complaints over the killings against all 3 commanders at the International Criminal Court. They've also filed a prosecution case against another soldier, Israeli-Argentinian Itai Kukirkov, who's been identified as among those at the scene when Hind and her relatives were killed. The case is being filed in Argentina. Kukirkov is the only soldier publicly identified by the foundation, though others within the company have been submitted confidentially to the ICC. The presence of dual national Israeli soldiers in Gaza is starting to result in international action. In the UK, the Metropolitan Police are assessing a criminal complaint against 10 dual nationals accused of war crimes in Gaza. And in France, complaints have been filed against 2 French-Israeli soldiers. The Hind Rajab Foundation seeks to hold Israeli soldiers accountable for war crimes committed in Gaza. And overall, it has found 24 suspects in the killings of Hind Rajab, her relatives, and the paramedics who tried to save her. The foundation concluded that their acts amounted to war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. What happened to Hind Rajab has pierced through statistics, and by putting individual faces to her killing, it reminds the public that war is carried out by people who can be held accountable for their crimes.
She was the only one left alive and begged them to come and rescue her.
خذيني تعالي.
اجي اخذك. حواليكي في ضرب رصاص.
خذيني.
A new Washington Post investigation has uncovered more heart-wrenching details about the deaths of a 6-year-old Palestinian girl and the men who tried to save her life back in January. As we've seen repeatedly, the Post's findings conflict with Israel's claims that the Israeli Defense Forces were not, in fact, responsible for this tragedy. Now, Hind Rajab, the 6-year-old girl, and her family lived in the northern part of Gaza City for decades, but they fled further west as attacks by the Israeli Defense Forces were underway. At 9:32 a.m. on January 28th, the IDF put out a statement in Arabic on X, asking residents in the west of Gaza City to evacuate immediately. In response, Hind's uncle, Bashar, and his wife loaded Hind and her 4 cousins into a car to evacuate the area. Their plan was to drive north out of the evacuation zone and back toward the family home in northern Gaza City. But they didn't make it that far. The family stopped less than a quarter of a mile from where they started. Around 1 p.m., Hind's cousin, 15-year-old Layan, called Bashar's brother, Samir. She told him they were surrounded and the Israeli army had opened fire on their car. Everyone in the vehicle except for Hind and Layan were dead, she said. Samir called another uncle, Mohammed, who eventually reached the Palestinian Red Crescent Society. A dispatcher first reached Layan around 2:30 p.m.
الو مرحبا.
ايوه بتدخل علينا. الدبابة جنبي.
انتوا متخبيين؟
في سيارة احنا جنبينا الدبابة.
انتوا جوا السيارة؟
The girl screamed and the call dropped. But while the dispatcher spoke to Layan, 62 gunshots were heard over 6 seconds in 2 bursts of fire. It's all recorded on the call. And in case there's any confusion over who's responsible for firing the shots, Stephen Beck, an acoustic analyst who consulted with the FBI for more than a decade, examined the recording at the request of the Post and found the number of rounds per minute fired was faster than an automatic AK patterned rifle, which Hamas fighters often use. The rate, he said, was more akin to weapons commonly issued to Israeli forces. So this evidence indicates that the family was fired at and killed by the IDF. But unfortunately, there's more. The call with Layan, which began around 2:30, ended in less than a minute. A satellite image captured roughly an hour later shows at least 4 Israeli armored vehicles around 300 meters up the road from the girls. After the call with Layan ended, the Palestinian Red Crescent Society operations room called back immediately. That's when Hind answered and told the dispatcher that Layan was dead. She also communicated that Israeli tanks were moving toward the car.
الدبابة جنبية.
الدبابة وين؟
جنبية.
الدبابة جنبكم؟ ما عم تتحرك ولا واقف؟ نزل حدا منها؟
هي بتتحرك.
تتحرك؟ طب هي بتتحرك جنب السيارة ولا هي جاي من ورا السيارة أو من قدام السيارة؟
من قدام السيارة.
هي جاي عليكي من قدام السيارة الدبابة؟ قريب كتير؟
كتير.
وعم تمشي؟
I just want you guys to consider what it's like to be a 6-year-old kid trapped in a car with a bunch of your dead family members, scared for your own life. Anyway, I'm sorry, it's just difficult to get through this story. At 5:40 p.m., Fathi Abu Warda, a liaison between the Palestinian Authority's health ministry in Ramallah and Kogat, an arm of the Israeli Defense Ministry that oversees the Palestinian territories, said that permission for an ambulance to proceed to Hind arrived in the form of a route map from Kogat. So Israelis are the ones who are communicating the route map. Abu Warda sent the map to the Palestinian Red Crescent Society dispatch team on WhatsApp at 5:40 p.m., according to messages reviewed by the Washington Post. So the map appeared to have been made in Google Maps and had a clear blue line instructing the ambulance drivers to follow a specific route. The paramedics headed out quickly to the location where Hind was trapped, using the route that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Ministry, had apparently given them. The paramedics were driving with the lights of the ambulance flashing when a green laser was seen hovering just in front of them. The dispatcher told the ambulance to keep moving slowly, but just seconds later, the line drops.
خليك معي شايف السيارة أنت؟ مش شايف إن مشغل السرينة واللواح؟ السرينة
As the call with paramedics drops at 6 p.m., a bang is audible on the call with Hind. At that point, she tells dispatchers she's okay, but they soon lost contact with her, this time for good. It wasn't until 12 days later, on February 12th, when the IDF finally withdrew from the area, that a Palestinian civil defense crew was able to reach the horrific scene. They found Hind's body in a car riddled with bullets, according to her uncle Samir Hamada, who also arrived at the scene early that morning. The door and pieces of the hood of the family car had been torn off. Samir described his brother's body as dangling from the driver's seat. Holes in Hind's family car were consistent with a machine gun used by Israeli tanks. The ambulance, which was found about 50 meters away from the car Hamda was killed in, was completely charred, as you saw in the video. None of the 6 munitions experts interviewed by the Washington Post could say definitively what munition caused the damage or killed the paramedics based on the ambulance alone, because of the time elapsed and the complexity of urban combat. They agreed, however, the damage to the ambulance was consistent with the potential use of a round fired from Israeli tanks that matched the vehicles captured in satellite imagery in the area that day. Among the killed Palestinians were, of course, 6-year-old Hind Rajab, Bashar Hamada and his 13-year-old daughter, Layan, along with 4 other family members. The paramedics who were killed were Yusuf, Zino, and Ahmad al-Madoun. The Israeli Defense Forces originally claimed that their forces weren't even present or within firing range of the Hamada family car. But later, the US State Department said the Israelis admitted that there had, in fact, been IDF units in the area. So once again, detailed investigations pour cold water on Israel's denials. After this story published, State Department spokesman Matt Miller said the following, quote, "The death of Hind Rajab is an unspeakable tragedy. So what we are going to do is take the information that is contained in the Washington Post story. We're going to go back to the government of Israel and ask them for further information. We would still welcome a full investigation into this matter and how it occurred in the first place." Let me go ahead and decode Matt Miller's statement for you. The US government is gonna do absolutely nothing about it. Nothing is gonna change. The conduct of the IDF will continue. More innocent people will be slaughtered, including little kids like 6-year-old Hind. And Americans get to feel super hopeless about it because both political parties are overwhelmingly in support of anything and everything the Israeli government wants to do. And then, even if they're found guilty of murdering a 6-year-old girl, right? Even if that's the case, does anyone really think that the Biden administration or whoever's in charge, it doesn't really matter, even if it was Donald Trump, is anyone really under the illusion that the weapons that we transfer over to Israel are going to have any strings attached? Okay, and like, how many times are we gonna see instances of paramedics being targeted, of kids getting killed? It's just gonna continue. And that's the worst part about all of this. You see the faces of the kids who get killed. You see the outcome of the investigations. And then you see the pathetic response by our State Department and our federal government. And what they communicate every day to us is the lives of one side matter. What happened to Israeli civilians it can only be amounted to an atrocity, should only be considered terrorism. And I agree with that take entirely. But when it comes to little girls like Hind, a 6-year-old whose final moments on this earth consisted of her being trapped in a car with her dead relatives, we're gonna ask some questions and then hope that the American people will forget about this story. Some of us don't forget. I'm one of them. These are the kinds of stories that blacken my heart.